I want you to settle into this story that I want to tell you. And I want us to go back to 1972 for a minute. On January 25th, 1972, Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American congresswoman, announced her candidacy for President of the United States, Sister Shirley Chisholm. From February 21st to February 28th, 1972, U.S. President Richard M. Nixon made an unprecedented 8-day visit to the People's Republic of China and met with Mao Zedong. Richard Nixon. On February 23rd, 1972, political activist, academic, and author Angela Davis was released from jail after a 16-month incarceration on aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder charges. Sister Angela Davis. On March 2nd and 3rd, 1972, Gil Scott-Heron recorded new music at RCA Studios in New York City with his musical collaborator, keyboardist Brian Jackson, Brother Gil Scott-Heron. And on June 4th, 1972, after 13 hours of deliberation by an all-white jury, Angela Davis was found not guilty on all the charges levied against her. On July 25th, 1972, U.S. health officials, I know you all will remember this one, U.S. health officials admitted that African Americans were used as guinea pigs in the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. African Americans were used as guinea pigs. And in August of 1972, that music that Brother Gil Scott-Heron recorded back in March was released as his second studio album called Free Will, defining the word will, W-I-L-L, as mental powers coupled with desire and intention and choice. The word will. The 7th track off of that Gil Scott-Heron album called Free Will, a song called No Knock, No Knock. Brother Gil Scott-Heron setting up that song by explaining the United States government no-knock warrant policy. Some of you know what no-knock is. The no-knock warrant policy, which allows law enforcement officials to enter a property without immediate prior notification of the residents. They don't need to knock or ring your doorbell before coming into your home. Now, prior to the passing of the no-knock warrant policy, there was what was called knock and announce. Knock and announce, meaning that police were required to give notice before making a forced entry into your home. And knock and announce is still current policy. However, as my friend Melissa would say, howsomever, in 1995, the Supreme Court of the United States created an exception to the rule of law. You know, you always got to look out for those exceptions to the rule. So the court created an exception to the knock and announce law in order to prevent the destruction of evidence. From the time law enforcement knocks and announces to the time they actually make entry into the property and are in contact with their suspect, they don't want you to have the opportunity to flush the weed or dump the contraband or erase the zip drives or whatever. So both knock and announce and no-knock raids are currently laws of the land. And some of our brothers and sisters out there listening right now are very familiar with those federal laws and police procedures. So that's what Brother Gil Scott-Heron was writing about and singing about in that 1972 song, No Knock. And if you listened very carefully, you would hear or would have heard Brother Gil specifically singling out and shouting out the case of our brother Fred Hampton. Some of you who are well studied in the history of the Black Panther Party will remember the name Fred Hampton. He was born in Summit, Illinois in 1948. Brother Hampton graduated from Proviso East High School with honors in 1966. Fred Hampton majored in pre-law at Triton Junior College in River Grove, Illinois. He led the youth council of the local NAACP as an activist and organizer in the city of Maywood, Illinois, where he grew up. In 1968, Fred Hampton joined the Black Panther Party and moved from the suburbs to downtown Chicago. Now, as a Black Panther, Brother Fred Hampton believed that racial and ethnic conflict between neighborhood gangs would only keep all of its members entrenched in poverty. And I believe that's true too. So Fred Hampton worked to successfully broker a non-aggression pact between some of Chicago's most powerful street gangs. And Brother Hampton pioneered the vision of a multiracial alliance between those street gangs. organizations and the more mainstream political organizers and community activists of that day. In May of 1969, Fred Hampton called a press conference to announce that he had successfully formed what he coined, listen carefully, brothers and sisters, what he coined a rainbow coalition. Sound familiar? A rainbow coalition. It was Brother Fred Hampton who was the first to use this term, not Reverend Jesse Jackson, who did eventually appropriate that name in forming his own unrelated coalition, the Rainbow Push Coalition, which we're all familiar with. So Fred Hampton was on the rise in the Black Panther Party. He had excellent organizing skills, substantial oratorical skills, and he was charismatic. Brother Hampton eventually became leader of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. And in that capacity, he taught daily political education classes. At 6 a.m., he organized weekly rallies. He oversaw a project for community supervision of the city's police department, and he spearheaded the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program. That's probably the biggest social program that the Black Panthers are known for, their free breakfast program. And Brother Hampton eventually became the leader of not only the Chicago chapter, but also of the state chapter of the Black Panther Party, which also made him a deputy chairman of the National Black Panther Party organization. So he was a young brother on the come up, as they say. And then came COINTELPRO, 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 which stands for Counterintelligence Program. COINTELPRO was a secret and sometimes illegal FBI program of covert operations, so undercover ops, patterned after similar Communist Party and Ku Klux Klan tactics. COINTELPRO was designed to surveil, infiltrate, discredit, and disrupt the civil rights and Black power movements, and in doing so to paint and to tag and to caption those organizations as Black hate groups. Now, beginning in 1966, COINTELPRO also conducted community surveillance programs that targeted and monitored not only Black leadership, but the entirety of Black America. This collection of data was organized by an FBI unit known as Division 5. Division 5, and housed under the category Race Relations and Related Matters. Race Relations and Related Matters. That's the umbrella label the FBI attached to how it planned to deal with Black folks in this country. And Fred Hampton's popularity amongst the people and his high rank in the Black Panther Party quickly made him a target of COINTELPRO, because the goal of that counterintelligence program under the leadership of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was to prevent the formation of a cohesive Black movement in the United States. And the original directive establishing the program emphasized the goal, and I'm quoting here, to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize the activities of Black nationalist, hate-type organizations and groupings, their leadership, spokesmen, membership, and supporters, end quote. The long-term goal of COINTELPRO was to, and again I'm quoting, to prevent militant Black groups from forming coalitions, building up their membership, gaining respectability, and developing a charismatic leader. All of that means fear of the Black man. From where I sit, that's what all of that means. Fear of the Black man. Now, agents, also known as snitches, are sources and informants in the context of the story I'm telling today inside Black nationalist and civil rights organizations used by law enforcement to infiltrate those groups and to bring down their members, with the ultimate goal being to jail activists and organizers for violating federal law. FBI agents and informants and sources and snitches were organized under an FBI operation known as TOPLEV, 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 which is short for Top Level Informant Program, TOPLEV. And as this program progressed over the years and became more sophisticated at infiltrating Black nationalist and civil rights organizations under COINTELPRO, the FBI informant program became known as simply Black Pro, BLACPRO, Black Pro. And I will remind you here, brothers and sisters, that we are speaking about the United States government's relationship with Black America. Just let what I'm saying to you really sink in. undercover ops. In October of 1967, the FBI launched a grassroots network that they called, listen carefully, the FBI launched a grassroots organization that they called, quote, a ghetto listening post or a ghetto informant program, with the goal of surveilling and eavesdropping on any person of interest who resides in a ghetto-type area or who frequents ghetto areas on a regular basis. And here's who they targeted to do the listening: employees and owners of taverns and liquor stores, drugstores and pawn shops, candy stores and barber shops, and other ghetto businesses, honorably discharged veterans, and especially members of veterans organizations, janitors of apartment buildings, newspaper and food and beverage distributors, taxi drivers, salesmen, and bill collectors. Those were all of the areas of black life from which the FBI recruited sources, informants, agents, snitches. And once they had successfully recruited agents and presumably put them on the FBI payroll, they steered those sources toward Afro-American type bookstores and asked them to identify their owners, operators, and clientele. The informants also reported on persons with criminal records of teenage gang members operating in the ghetto and on changes in the attitude of the Negro community towards the white community and the sentiments and feelings of individuals who resided in black neighborhoods. The FBI also instructed the informants to document, listen carefully, to document such things as immorality, dishonesty, and hypocrisy. In 1967, some 1,246 FBI agents received civil rights enforcement or racial intelligence assignments each month. That same year, the FBI opened a file on Fred Hampton and began keeping close tabs on his activities. Fred Hampton's phones were tapped in February of 1968, and in May of that year, he was placed on the FBI's Agitator Index as a key militant leader. The Agitator Index was a list of so-called rabble-rousers, individuals who have demonstrated a potential for fomenting racial discord. By the summer of 1968, FBI agents had recruited 3,248 people as sources, informants, agents, and snitches. Now, this is just a little history, brothers and sisters, so that you thoroughly understand, in case you didn't already know, why many black and brown people are so adamantly opposed to snitching on one another in our culture and in our community. And I would remind our listeners at this point, these are the same types of individuals, sources, informants, agents, snitches, that in many cases sold their own African people to Europeans to be slaves of the white man in the Caribbean and in North America and in South America. It is the same spirit in a man that allows him to do that and to become that. All right, so let's connect all these dots and I'm going to bring this story home. In late 1968, the Racial Matters Squad of the FBI's Chicago field office recruited an individual named William O'Neal, who had recently been arrested twice for interstate car theft and impersonating a federal officer. In exchange for having his felony charges dropped and a monthly stipend, William O'Neal apparently agreed to infiltrate the Black Panther Party as a counterintelligence operative. William O'Neal joined the Black Panthers and rose up in the organization, eventually becoming director of chapter security and eventually Fred Hampton's bodyguard. In early October of 1969, Fred Hampton and his girlfriend, Deborah Johnson, were pregnant with their first child, Fred Hampton Jr., and the couple rented a 4.5-room apartment on 2337 West Monroe Street in Chicago, right near the Black Panther Party headquarters. So the apartment became a bit of a hangout of sorts for Black Panther Party members. And William O'Neal, Fred Hampton's bodyguard, the FBI source, the informant, the agent, the snitch, O'Neal reported to his FBI superiors that the Panthers kept a stockpile of arms in that apartment. And William O'Neal drew the FBI a map of the layout of the apartment, including how the furniture was arranged in every room and the exact position of the bed in which Fred Hampton and his girlfriend slept. And with this information, and armed with a warrant, the FBI organized a 14-man pre-dawn raid of Brother Fred Hampton's apartment looking for illegal weapons. So on the evening of December 3rd, 1969, FBI informant William O'Neill slipped a barbiturate sleeping agent known as secobarbital. This was the same drug that Phyllis Hyman used to end her life, secobarbital. William O'Neill slipped that into a drink that Fred Hampton consumed during a dinner that William O'Neill himself had prepared in order to sedate Brother Hampton so he would not awaken during the subsequent raid. William O'Neill then left the apartment, and around 1:30 a.m. on the morning of December 4th, Fred Hampton fell asleep mid-sentence talking to his mother on the telephone. At 4 a.m., the heavily armed police team arrived at the apartment and divided into two teams, 8 people in the front, 6 people in the rear. And at 4:45 in the morning, law enforcement rushed the door and forcibly stormed into the apartment. Automatic gunfire was used, and Fred Hampton remained asleep in the south bedroom, unable to awaken as a result of the barbiturates that William O'Neill, the FBI infiltrator, had slipped into his drink. And Brother Hampton was lying on a mattress in the bedroom with his fiancée, who again was 9 months pregnant with their child. 2 officers found him wounded in the shoulder. 2 additional shots were heard, and it was later discovered that those gunshots were fired at point-blank range into Fred Hampton's head. And Brother Hampton's body was then dragged into the doorway of the bedroom and left in a pool of blood. Fred Hampton's pregnant fiancée and his unborn son both survived the raid. And here's the epilogue. Here's how it all ended. On January 21st, 1970, the death of Fred Hampton was ruled to be justifiable homicide. And 20 years later, in 1990, the FBI source, the informant, the agent, the snitch, William O'Neill, committed suicide after admitting his involvement in setting up the raid. The brother killed himself. So that whole Fred Hampton story that I just told you is what Brother Gil Scott-Heron was referring to in his song, No Knock. And Brother Gil was telling us in that song that the FBI used a no-knock warrant in the raid that ended in the death of Brother Fred Hampton, who some years ago, at the age of 21, he joined the ancestors. 21 years old. So rest in peace, power and paradise, Brother Fred Hampton. We remember you and speak your name today, Brother Fred Hampton. If you're interested in knowing more about COINTELPRO, and I highly recommend that you learn more about it. If you want to understand what you're seeing out here in the streets with police officers and shooting down unarmed black men and women, black and brown people, study COINTELPRO. This has been going on for a long time, brothers and sisters. A long time. And even before that, the FBI, it was the slave patrols. So if you're interested in knowing more about COINTELPRO, let me refer you to the book, Racial Matters, the FBI's Secret File on Black America, 1960 to 1972, by Kenneth O'Reilly. Racial Matters, the FBI's Secret File on Black America, 1960 to 1972, by Kenneth O'Reilly. That is where I sourced many of the details of the Fred Hampton story I just shared with you this morning. The book Racial Matters, the FBI's Secret File on Black America, 1960 to 1972, by Kenneth O'Reilly.